is Way Up with Angela Yee. I'm here. Jasmine Brand is here. Yes. And I'm ready for this journalism talk with Sowmya Krishnamurthy in the building. I call you Sowmya K all the time because that's your name on social media.
We've known each other a long time, since the blog era. Anyone remembers? I remember Angela was outside during that 08, 09. I think you're still outside, but yeah. She's driven me home a few times.
Yeah, I was outside.
Responsible friend.
She's the responsible friend, and somehow she would make it to like an early morning show. I don't know how you did it.
I don't know how she did that.
Listen, I'm glad I don't have to do that no more.
Yeah, amen to that.
But yes, Sowmya and I have known each other for quite some time, and what I love is that you've been so consistent and also evolving with your journalism and unafraid to say certain things that some people may play it politically correct.
Yeah, it's a great thing when you're not on a rapper's payroll. You can basically say whatever you want. But, you know, for me, it was important as somebody who's been in the industry for, I'm going to age myself, about 15 years now. And being a journalist, you start out with those small little pieces like a XXL or The Source. And over time, you want to evolve. So for me, it was really important with my first book, Fashion Killer, that I did something that an important story about hip hop and fashion that chronicles hip hop in a way that I think, gives it that prestige element, which I think is so missing sometimes in journalism.
Well, Fashion Killer, and look, I was giving you some of this Mercer and Prince whiskey to try.
Yes.
And that
I drink about twice a year, but I said, you know what?
3 times now.
Now it's 3 times.
Cheers.
Cheers.
For you to try this. This is A$AP Rocky's whiskey, and only makes sense because obviously Fashion Killer is an A$AP Rocky song.
It is. It is the famous song where I think he name checks about like 26 different labels. And at the time it was so funny because although A$AP's from Harlem, he dressed like he's from Soho. He sounded like he was from Houston. So he really represented this kind of like pan-regional artist. And I think that is also the story of hip hop and fashion. Of course, it's a New York story, but there's elements of Atlanta and LA and Miami, but also Paris when we're talking about like haute couture.
Chanel.
Of course, Chanel. I go through the whole like Coco Chanel story, the Karl Lagerfeld story. We're talking about streetwear, the Japanese story. And to me, it was just showing hip hop has this global impact. And even though I don't think it always gets the respect that it deserves, like this is why books like this, I think, are important to show people maybe who don't understand the music or the culture what the contribution is.
And that's what I was going to ask you, why do you feel like this book is needed now? But I feel like you kind of explained it just now.
Well, you know what's so crazy? So, backwards a few years ago, this was started as an article for XXL. So a lot of times books start out as articles that journalists write. So shout outs to anyone out there who's writing on the music front.
Like Aaliyah S. King, I remember she was writing an article. Well, I'll talk about that after, but go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And, it was crazy to me that no one had written a book about hip hop and fashion. There had been a few memoirs, obviously Dapper Dan's book, which is amazing. Right. There were some, coffee table books.
Lots of coffee table books.
People love pictures. It looks really nice. By the way, Fashion Killer does have 40 photos.
You got some good photos, exclusive photos.
I got some exclusive photos. I know.
Amazing.
You got some Biggie stuff in there.
Photos.
Yeah, I got some really exclusive pictures.
Cool J. I mean, look at this. Dapper Dan, I think, and you also talk about Tyson Beckford and the impact that he had when he was the Polo Ralph Lauren model.
And people often forget he was discovered in the pages of The Source.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
When you read my book, you will know all. And I think it's one of those things where even for myself, I felt like I knew everything, but as I was doing the research, even I learned things like, whoa, Tyson was discovered by The Source. Like he's a truly hip hop model.
Yeah. You said he used to have a gun in his backpack at all times, and they used to call him Two Guns?
I believe so. Yeah,
I believe
so. Allegedly, right? And he used to run with like the Low Lives, so that if anyone from New York remembers the Low Lives, who used to boost basically Ralph Lauren.
Nice.
But there was so many like different stories from Tupac walking the Versace show right before he passed away. Biggie being the first rapper to wear Bape. I'm sorry, Soulja Boy, it was not you. I'm sorry, Lil Wayne, it was not you.
Yeah.
It's between Biggie and the Beastie Boys. And after all my research, I'm going to give it to Biggie because he there's a great story, and I actually have the picture in the book. Right before he passed, he had done a photo shoot, and the photographer Sean Mortensen was like, "Hey, I know this guy Nigo, and he has a brand called Bape. Can you put on this hoodie?" It was too small for Biggie, so he draped it over him almost like a cape. So it looks like he's wearing it almost like a blazer. Sean takes the picture and sends it to Nigo, and apparently Biggie was so excited, he wanted to get Bape in his sizes because they just didn't make it in the big size. But sadly, he passed away before that happened. So many of these iconic artists that we know them for one thing, we don't realize they were so instrumental in the world of fashion.
And I remember you also in the book talked about how when the Roots did the song What They Do,
Yeah.
Biggie was personally offended because that song What They Do was all about how people in the industry really front and wear certain things and
Hyper
certain
commercialism. Yeah, I interviewed Questlove and he talked about that. At that time, you got to remember the backpackers were on one side, and then sort of like the bling, ghetto fabulous era rappers were on another side, and there was a lot of back and forth. That's a great video. It's one of my favorite videos. The Roots, What They Do. But talking to somebody like a Questlove or a Faramonch, getting their perspective because they were seeing, okay, you don't got to worry about fashion because no one's looking at you. But many of them wanted to dress nice. So some of them did try to get stylists or they wanted to look nice. So there's a lot of just great history, great stories. And it's like a good 50-year retrospective from 1973 to 2023. So if you know absolutely nothing about hip hop and fashion, you will read it and become like a professor level. I guarantee it. It's PhD level. And if you know a little bit, I think you're just going to get so much more from these colorful stories, these vibrant moments. Even something like the Tommy Hilfiger rumor back in the 90s.
Remember that?
I remember
No, what
the
was
day.
it? What was the rumor?
So I remember this day. It's so clear, and I write about it in the book. I was in middle school. My best friend at the time was a huge Tommy Hilfiger person, and she pulls me aside. Mind you, we're in middle school. We're kids.
I couldn't afford Tommy Hilfiger when I was younger.
Me either.
Yeah.
So
She talks about that too. In
I
the
do.
book.
I did get a bootleg Tommy Hilfiger shirt.
I
His
saw that.
name was misspelled, but it was written in cursive, so you couldn't tell. Like,
Right,
there was
right,
like extra letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't afford any of this stuff either. But
rumor.
the rumor was that Tommy had gone on Oprah and essentially said things that were incredibly racist and problematic. How he didn't want black people,
I did
brown
hear
people.
that.
Remember that? Everybody.
Did he actually
it
say that?
It kind of ruined the brand.
It 1,000%
I did hear
affected the
that.
brand. So I interviewed Tommy Hilfiger, his brother Andy Hilfiger. That rumor was a lie.
Yeah.
It was complete fake news. They did a whole investigation about it and they traced it back to a college campus. I think it was just some kid making up a rumor. Remember, these are the early days of the internet. They're
Right.
like
No
message
fact-checking.
boards. I mean, there's still no fact checking,
Right.
30 years later, but there was even less fact checking.
But he couldn't go on social media and be like, I never
that's
said
not
that.
true, yeah.
And what's crazy, he ended up doing Oprah years later, and they both sat there, and Oprah's like, this never happened.
Right.
To this day, as I'm doing press for this book, it bugs people out. Like, wait, I gave up all my Tommy Hilfiger for no reason. Like, I
Yeah.
could be wearing that now. Yeah, go bring it back from the archives.
I wonder why at that time he wasn't vocal, like more vocal in saying that wasn't true.
Did he? What? Maybe he wasn't aware until later. Like
No, he
it-
was
No, they
aware.
were aware. And in
He was
fact, there
definitely aware.
were news articles and like legitimate newspapers that did discredit it.
Yeah.
So
But I feel like he should have been really loud
vocal.
about how that wasn't true. Because remember Aaliyah, and you talk about Aaliyah and
You
her
loved-
fashion.
you loved Aaliyah.
And Aaliyah was the kind of face of Tommy
Yeah.
Hilfiger at the time.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know what their sort of PR strategy. Remember, this is the 90s. For all we know, maybe a publicist said, look, if you bring more attention to it, it's just the rumor's never going to die. The optics aren't great. Just focus on designing clothes. Now, fast forward all these years later, Tommy Hilfiger is still very successful. I would argue it's one of the most successful American heritage brands that we have. It's like Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, DVF. There's a handful of them.
Yeah.
But it just reminds us of when the brand is a namesake brand. As the designer, your reputation matters.
It
It isn't
does.
like a Nike or Adidas where most of us don't know the face of who's behind that.
Right.
If it's like a
Like the
Chanel,
Jasmine brand.
we
Okay, all right.
the Jasmine brand.
Yeah,
so
it's
if there's a fake rumor about you, and now you have so many opportunities to have your social media platform. There's so many more media platforms.
Right.
But I agree with you. I'm actually surprised that Tommy didn't go more on the offensive, but maybe he was advised not to.
And
I
his
was
son
today
is a-
years old when I found out it wasn't true. I always thought until just now you guys talked about it. I
Yeah.
always thought it was true.
And
so
his son
tomorrow,
is- his son
Jasmine's
is a
going to be
rapper
wearing
also.
red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
Right? And Rich Hill. Isn't that his son?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
he
he's a
was
rapper.
trying to be a rapper. Funny enough, I think about the time, Angela, you and I met during the blog era, I remember that he was, sort of circulating. Yeah, I don't think much came from that.
Well, listen, and so I appreciate you for clearing that up for Jasmine. Remember, Timberland had a similar issue too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Timberland.
Timberland did, as I talk about, so the the work boot company, when hip hop was really gravitating towards it, some of the leadership at the time did sort of minimize hip hop, almost like, yeah, you can wear our stuff. We kind of don't want you to.
Right. So that really happened.
Yes, and but concurrently they would also do like ad buys in the source. So it was a little bit of like at the same time.
You want our money, but you don't want us to wear it.
Which I think is still a problem to this day. I mean, you look at someone like a Dapper Dan, so much of his comeback was because of what happened with Gucci and one of his designs essentially being copied and pasted on the runway, what he had created for Olympian Diane Dixon, and it was only because of social media.
Everybody was like, you stole that design directly from Dapper Dan. And, you know, interestingly enough, Trouble Andrew, he did the Gucci Ghost line. And the reason he got that was because he was doing like these kind of bootleg Gucci. And he thought they were going to be mad, like, don't do that. But instead, they were like, let's do a line around this.
And it's hard, right? Because I understand for a brand as well, you want to protect your brand. You don't want other people taking your logo, taking your designs and making money off it. And especially if it's not regulated, you don't know about quality control, customer service, all of those things. But I do think Dapper Dan specifically, who was known for these like knockoffs, and what ended up happening was, you know, back in the day, Fendi, he had multiple raids by luxury lines, and Fendi was kind of the final nail in the coffin. Funny enough, the lawyer for Fendi was Sowmya Sotomayor, who's now a Supreme Court
justice.
Wow.
And it was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, and she, according to Dapper Dan, she actually complimented one of his knockoffs in the process of taking him down.
I remember, and he talks about it in his book.
Yeah, he does, which is a great book, by the way. But again, it just shows how for so long hip hop was the outsider. Then it was seen more as a consumer. Like, yeah, we'll let you buy, but you got to buy off the rack. So even the story I talk about, Rocawear, the inception of Jay-Z and Dame Dash's fashion line, they wanted to get, and I interviewed Dame for this, they wanted to get a deal with Iceberg. So if anyone remembers in the 90s, Iceberg was it.
Like, they brought it back too.
They did bring it back, and it was a line that I would say is analogous to like, you know, Gucci or Louis Vuitton in hip hop. Back then, in the 90s.
Jasmine's like, calm down.
And I mean, she's working on her Tommy Hilfiger wardrobe, so there's stuff going on the side of her.
Not too much on me and Tommy Hilfiger.
Yeah, she's trying to catch up from the 90s. Yes, she will be wearing clothes from the 90s tomorrow, because she now knows she can.
Yep.
But you know, according to Dame, him and Jay, like, you know, we're talking to Iceberg, like, hey, Jay has name dropped you in all these records. Can we do something together? And according to Damon, they said, yeah, you can go to the sample sale and go buy some stuff. And you know Dame, all he needs is that battery in his back. Okay, bet. So you don't want to work with us. We're not only going to start a line, it's going to be more successful than yours. And with Rocawear, they were so brilliant because they had almost like vertical integration. We make the clothes, then we're going to put it on the wrappers, and the music videos became just like 4-minute commercials for the line. They're going to wear it on their album cover. Again, that's just free advertising. They're going to wear it in the movies that we make. Like, they were hitting so many cultural touch points and made Rocawear more relevant than Iceberg.
Right.
But a lot of those things came from rejection. And it's crazy to think about. Like, imagine turning down Jay-Z, and we're talking, this
that's
is already
hilarious
like
now.
Volume 1, Volume 2.
That's very arrogant of them.
But it's also very common in the music business. Like, people forget, Jay-Z couldn't get a record deal. That's why they started Rockefeller. And now looking back, so many people will take credit for it. But what is that saying? Like, success has many fathers, but like failure is an orphan. Like, no one wants to claim the failure. And you see that time and again, whether it be in hip hop or in fashion.
I remember when Rockefeller was first kicking off, and the song Dead Presidents.
Part 2.
Yeah, that was actually on the Battle of the Beats with Angie Martinez.
Wow.
Remember, she used to do that on Hot 97, and it would win, like, and then it would retire if you won the whole week. And so that really kind of like kicked things off. I feel like in New York.
But that's like so many of these like icons now really had to struggle for either acceptance or for somebody to believe in them, to invest in them. And I think it still does happen in creative fields because most people aren't inherently risk takers.
And you know what else I was going to say? Aside from fashion, another business that they had, Damon had tried to venture into at that time was vodka. Remember, he had the Armadale.
Of
I remember
course.
Armadale.
That's a whole different field, especially back then.
And I believe Armadale, if I'm right, Armadale. So also, quick other story. I'm currently working on the Rockefeller book.
Oh, so, you know, I was about to bring that up,
that's
girl.
coming up next.
I was easing into that.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Rockefeller.
No Vaseline.
Yeah. Oh. So, with Armadale, I believe that was named after like a Scottish castle, and that was more like Biggs's sort of like baby was the vodka.
Okay.
But that was something about Rockefeller, like they wanted all aspects of lifestyle because if we're influencing people want to look like us, talk like us, party like us, why aren't we making money? And I think that goes back to the founding of the label essentially being like hustlers and street guys, and the way that your mind is wired is just very different.
It seems very parallel to Puff, what he was trying to do.
Yeah, in many
Sean
ways.
Shannon.
I mean, but you know what? Even let's flash back before that. Wu-Tang with Wu Wear.
Yeah.
And remember, they had to do
Yeah.
so, and this was a funny story, but I remember when they did that Wu Wear song. Remember, RZA did the Wu Wear song, and that was for a soundtrack. And they gave him money to do a song, and he basically did a Wu Wear ad.
I love it.
I love it.
It's sort of
And
like
the
LL
song.
Cool J and FUBU. During the Gap ad, he's shouting out FUBU.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
wearing
Which
the
was
cap.
so
For
crazy
us,
for them
by
to.
us, yeah. And I talk about that as well, where even sometimes it's using sort of kind of this backdooring into the situation where okay, like FUBU's not going to get the national ad campaign, so let's kind of do a workaround. So there's a lot of that. Even someone like a Carl Kanai,
Right.
So Carl Kanai, April Walker, Cross Color, some of like the original successful hip hop lines. So I interviewed Carl. He gave a great story when he wanted Tupac to be the face of Carl Kanai, and he said he went to like I think it was like the SLS Hotel in Beverly Hills. He said Pac was on his laptop typing away something. It wasn't a laptop; it was a computer.
I was like, wow, he had a
Like,
laptop.
hold
Yeah,
on.
I mean, Tupac was from the future.
Yeah.
It's very
And he's
feasible.
also kind of alive still, people say. So like, it could've
allegedly,
been, yeah.
allegedly. So he's working on a movie script. Who knows what that script was? And Carl essentially asked Pac, like, "Hey, would you, be the face of my line?" Pac's like, "Yeah, of course." So Carl's getting really nervous, like, "How much are you going to charge me?" And according to him, Pac's like, "Nothing. I don't charge my people anything."
Gotta love it.
And then Pac became the face as well as creative design, that iconic Carl Kanai
Carl
ad
Kanai was-
with him
Yeah.
sitting on the basketball rim. It's very kind of above the rim.
The
Yeah.
pictures in the book.
Yeah.
Listen, I had on a Carl Kanai t-shirt hoodie, long sleeve t-shirt hoodie in my license picture back then when I got my
I don't think I
license.
ever had any. I mean,
It was
a
a
lot of
purple
stuff
Carl
I couldn't
Kanai shirt.
really
I'll
kind
never
of
forget that.
afford.
It was huge too. I think it was a large, and I was like 80 pounds.
Oh, that was perfect. That was a
Yeah.
great part about that era. It didn't matter if you ate carbs that day. Everyone just looked really
Because
really
everything was
good.
big.
Everything
And you
was
talk
big.
about that in the book too when it comes to women and fashion, right?
Yeah.
How there was a time when the baggy clothes, MC Light,
Yeah.
that's what we wore. But then there was a bit of a pushback on that when we saw Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown and everybody else come out after that.
Yeah, they showed their body more. Things were more fitted.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think in the beginning, for so many women in hip hop, and in some ways it still exists, they want to be respected by the guys. And as women, it's like focus on my rhymes, focus on me as an artist, not sort of sexualizing me. And that's what you saw, whether it was MC Light, I would even say Queen Latifah to a certain extent, but it started getting sexier. I would say like a Salt and Pepper, where they
Yeah.
were very
The
much
body
like
suits with
the
the jackets,
bodysuit,
yeah.
like Push It. Like they were, there's really not a lot of subtlety. What
Push
they
It
were
was
selling.
very sexual.
It still is very sexual. But I think when you get to sort of the Lil' Kim, Foxy era, all of a sudden women were saying that we are sexual beings. We want to have sex the same way men do. We're going to rap about it, talk about it, live this lifestyle. And fast forward all these years later, I think you see that in hip hop even now. And I think a lot of women do feel pressure to look a certain way.
Right.
They want to dress in a way that sort of satisfies what a man's going to find attractive.
Yeah.
And my thing is like, be yourself. If that's you and that makes you feel confident and outgoing, that's awesome. But I think so many artists you see nowadays, it's almost like wearing a mask or wearing a costume. Like, I don't think that's you.
It's interesting because we were talking about this earlier, right? With Scarlett.
Yeah.
And then, she did the song in the video and she's like, and we're not used to seeing her like that.
Right.
And people were like, the label wants you to do that. She's like, no, I wanted to do that.
Right.
Which
and
could
I
very
wanted
well
to
be
feel. And then
true.
Glorilla just recently posted herself, right, with her shirt off. And
And
they
she got
like,
new boobs, so
right.
I
and they're
don't- I
like, why
get
is the
it.
label making you do this?
Hey,
and she's like,
that she wants to show off the
Right.
investment. Did
She's
I
like,
get
I
a
pay for
return on
these.
She did
investment?
say that.
Did she really?
That's essentially what she said.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, who are some of the up and coming artists that you think are going to be on the verge of, fashion that we should kind of be checking for? That
Yeah.
are not people that we know, like Pharrell and
Well,
ASAP.
I think what's hard now is a lot of what used to make fashion, I think, so exciting was there were regional differences. So people had their own signature because, I grew up in the Midwest. I didn't know what people were wearing in New York.
Can we talk about where Kalamazoo?
I did
That's what
grow
I said.
up
I said, where is
Kalamazoo.
that?
If you are a Yankees fan, Derek Jeter, we went to the same high school. Many years apart. He's
I'll
much
tell you
older
a
than
good
me.
Kalamazoo story when we're
Yes, and we're about an hour from Grand Rapids, where DeBarge is from.
okay.
How far are you from Detroit?
Like 2.5.
Out of all,
2 if you drive fast.
out of all of Michigan, do you think Detroit has the best fashion?
If you like Gators, if you like
It's
Pele
flashy.
Pele,
It's flashy.
It's very
furs.
flashy.
Yeah,
I got
Bucks.
my one Pele Pele jacket.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bushman from Detroit. He gave me a Lions Pele Pele jacket.
For me, growing up on New York hip hop, I was just obsessed with the way guys from New York dressed. Like, to me, guys from Harlem are still like the hottest.
Well, I was gonna
guys.
say, I read that you say that Harlem people from Harlem are the best dressed in New York. Do you
Yeah, I
still
was
feel
in
like that?
Interview Magazine interviewed me, and they were like, who are the best dressed people?
You said
I
Harlem.
just have like a soft spot. Like, in my heart, I always tell this to people. I can only date you if you were at the Tunnel in '98. And that is such
Well, I
a
was at the
loaded
Tunnel in
statement. Well, so whoever's hanging
I
out
was
Angela
actually when
in
Miss Info
'98.
did that big story on the tunnel. I was with her while she was going to the tunnel and
Hopefully no one
observing
got
and doing
stabbed.
interviews. We were actually got to be in the booth during
Oh,
that
that's
time.
good.
So we were
That's good.
in the booth, and the booth is elevated,
Yeah.
so you could watch. And I saw so many things while I was up in that booth, looking down and seeing what people were doing.
Amazing.
I was like, "This is wild." But
And
it
as
was-
a kid growing up, like, to me, that was just iconic. Like, I
Right.
wish I were 10
that
years
era.
older so I could just go,
and shout out to Jessica Rosenblum because
She's the promoter, right?
Stressica Rosenblum is
well,
what they called
honestly,
her.
Stress
Yeah,
Entertainment.
She was.
She used to love me, and so they put me on the list.
Nice.
I never had to wait online, and I was in college,
Wow.
and I could like go in the back door and go in, not wait
Love it.
online, and everybody there. And I run into people to this day, like security who used to work at the tunnel, like,
I
oh, I
love
remember
that.
you from the tunnel,
Aw.
because I really used to be there every single week.
Yeah,
drinking amaretto sours.
Oh boy, she still
was my
drinks
drink of
that.
choice
She
back
still
in the
drinks
day.
that.
I used to like those too, and Long Island's because
But I mean, iconic nights there, like Method Man and Redman. I think that night, DMX
DMX, yeah.
in the tunnel, there were so many. like,
Funkmaster Flex night.
every single artist, and Cypher Sounds would be there too.
Yeah.
And the street teams, that's when street teams were really big.
I started my career as a unpaid intern at Bad Boy in street team promotions.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Now, since you brought up Bad Boy, I know Jasmine want to bring this up because you put out a tweet and
did I
people were...
I'm always tweeting and people
Yeah.
are yelling at me. I love it.
You mentioned that you worked there before, and you had never, when Puffy was married, not married, was dating Cassie, you had never saw anything,
Yeah.
alarming.
and people were upset. They were like, why would she even write this at all?
Right.
Because I think, and again, the problem with social media is there's zero nuance and it's whatever you put out there and how it's open to interpretation. And for me, and I did a follow-up tweet to explain the
But we didn't see
reason-
that one. We didn't see the follow-up.
Yeah,
saw
no,
it.
nobody ever.
I
sees
just
the
wanted her
follow-up.
to explain it.
But the reason I said that is because I'll be honest, I've had a lot of conversations behind the scenes with people in the industry, very powerful people, when the allegations against Puff first happened. And it isn't just Puff, it's even other people, whether it's R. Kelly, a variety of people, Russell Simmons. Oftentimes, especially, men in the industry will say, well, I never saw it. And because I didn't see it, it didn't happen. Even when I speak to some women, that's the mentality. Well, I knew that person and they were nice to me, so there's no way they can be a monster. And the reason I said that, and I said it in the tweet, just because I didn't see it, we still must listen to alleged victims. It's not about your personal experience, and we can't view especially serious allegations through just what you experience, because people have multiple sides, and how somebody acts at work, let's say in a board meeting, is very different how they act with a romantic partner. Now, sometimes that is consistent where they're just a terrible person all around, but usually people have different masks. And I do think one reason that we haven't seen a Me Too reckoning in hip hop, there's a lot of reasons, and I don't think the show is long enough to go into the whole dissertation. So many people, their first response is, "Well, I didn't see it. I didn't experience it." So
didn't
maybe
happen.
or maybe she's looking for money.
That's
she's
the first
looking
thing that
for
people
clout.
think too.
Yeah.
Like they think, because I will say, and I always say this to people, I know people who have been awful to me, but they've been
100%.
great to other people.
And vice versa. I
And-
know
yeah,
people
and
who
vice
I've had
versa.
amazing experiences. I might even speak to another journalist. The way that person treats a male journalist is different than a female journalist. You know, where were they kind of on the pecking order? At what time in their career did you see them? So I think that's so important. It doesn't just matter your personal experience with an individual. You have to still let alleged victims tell their story.
How do you handle that when somebody was, let's say somebody was great to you, but they've been awful to other people?
Yeah.
Right? How do you then treat that person? Is it just based off of how they treated you? Or is it like, I can't really be around that anymore because I know what they're capable of?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's very difficult if there's actual allegations or there is something where it's publicly been discussed. I think that's one thing versus behind closed doors. Because, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. I've spoken to women who say, so-and-so did this to me or so-and-so made me uncomfortable, but I'm not ready to come forward.
Right.
And that's,
I definitely know people
And for
who...
us, I don't think that's my place then to tell their story.
Right.
Because that's, you know, as a victim, you have the right to enunciate that as much or as little as you want, because I don't know where you are in your healing journey. But I do think that, you know, we all kind of know behind the scenes who's sort of a nightmare to work with, who's unethical, who might be a creepazoid. So personally, I mean, and I'm very kind of lucky in this place in my career, I just try to like distance myself as much as possible.
Because you see, Russell Simmons was saying how people get so mad every time somebody comes to visit him in Bali. And every time he does post, you know, that somebody's there with him,
doing
Usher,
yoga.
Taraji, whatever is happening.
They're always in very strange positions, but yeah.
Well, yoga's, you know.
But it's also tricky too, right? What is the line between an allegation versus a conviction?
Right.
How do you deal with gossip? Because as an allegation is one thing, but do we then have to be sort of the trial jury executioner? Like there has to be a conviction.
Right.
But
I don't know
even
the
if
answer.
there's not a conviction, that doesn't mean it didn't happen too. By the way,
1000%.
And also-
and even if there's a conviction, that doesn't mean it did. It's just a gray area.
But it's also when there's like multiple victims,
Yes.
multiple alleged victims, it's kind of like, well, is everyone...
To me, I look at a pattern of behavior.
Right.
But I also, you know, I don't believe in cancel culture. I think that's something that's a misnomer, and you can't cancel a person.
I don't think it really happens anyway.
And it doesn't happen.
I don't think it really
I believe in
happens.
accountability.
Except Tommy Hilfiger. Just joking.
Just in
No, he's doing
Jasmine's
fine. He's
wardrobe,
doing
but
fine.
now he's doing great.
Yeah.
I actually had on a Tommy Hilfiger sweatsuit during the lip service tour, but I knew he never really said that.
See, there you go. But I think it's also hard because, you know, now there is this expectation, okay, if everyone feels a certain way, then there needs to be kind of like a monolith. And that's just not how it is.
And
you know?
people have to understand how difficult that is. Sowmya, have you ever had an experience, and you don't have to name a name, that you felt like...
Is this a therapy session?
No, I'm just wondering, because Cheryl Lee Ralph was up here, and she talks about it in her book.
Yeah.
You know, a situation, but she still never named that person.
Yeah.
And you would think in the position that she's in now, at some point, you know, you feel like, okay, I'm saving time, but it's still hard to be able to do that. And I'm just wondering, like, for you being in the position that you're in, you've interviewed a ton of people.
Yeah.
Have you ever had something that you felt like inappropriate, or somebody you just don't mess with because it's something they did?
You know, it's
To you
hard because I
personally.
think as women in hip hop, and I mean, you know this well, Angela, there's not a lot of us. And the era I started in was the put your head down and do the work era.
Yeah.
No one wants to see you cry. No one cares. Literally, they'd say, if you want to cry, go to the bathroom and cry.
When I started radio, they told me, if you're too sensitive, don't do this.
Yeah. And it's really hard for women because, you know, for me, it was very important. I don't want to just cover female artists because sometimes they'll do that to women. Okay, you talk to the female rappers or you cover R&B because that's like girl music. But no, I grew up listening to Nas and Big and Mobb Deep and Premier, and those were the people I wanted to interview. But that also meant that sometimes you had to, you know, have this kind of shield around you, be very cognizant how you move. Like, it's funny, even, you know, we're having a drink here for probably the first like 10, 12 years of my career when I was offered like alcohol or, you know, other treats. I would always say no because I wanted them to know, no, I'm about my business.
Right.
Or if an artist is like, hey, what are you doing afterwards? Oh, I'm going home to transcribe this interview. Like, I don't want to hang out. I don't want you to think we're dating. I don't want your number.
But that's so unfair because men can hang out. And it's like, if you do, you're like, okay, yeah, let's go eat. That doesn't mean I'm trying to...
let's go hang out, but sometimes that's where the deals are made.
Right.
Deals are made
It's
at
so true.
the strip club. They're made after hours.
Yeah.
They're made at the golf course.
Or even in the studio.
And it's funny you say that. I was talking to an executive not too long ago, very high level male executive at a major label. And I was trying to explain to him that the studio is not a welcoming place for women. And I know as someone who's been in the studio, I'm usually there to interview an artist or observe. The minute you go in as a woman, it's different now because, obviously we're grown. But when you're first starting out, the first assumption is, well, who are you sleeping with here?
Right.
Because there's no reason you should be here. Now, mind you, this person could be a journalist, an executive, an engineer, a producer. The first is, oh, well, who are you here with?
Yeah.
And if you're like, nobody, great, then they're going to hit on you. And that's just what it is. And it's funny because I was telling this executive, he was truly shocked. He's like, well, I don't understand. Why don't women just show up? I said, no. The session's at 4 a.m.
Right.
It's all men.
People
and
are
me.
drinking, smoking.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think for women, it's really, really tough. Of course, like all women, I've had those experiences, whether it's like sexual harassment, being so-called blackballed if you don't go out with somebody. And this isn't just artists. I've had editors, like people unassuming. The minute you don't want to date them, all those opportunities are gone.
Right. And, you definitely are taught early on. I remember somebody in the business told me one time, just get used to it. It's part of what it is. As a woman in this business, guys are going to hit on you and things that you just got to be okay
And in a
with.
weird way, sometimes they'll say, well, that's a compliment. They think you're pretty. Versus what's the converse? Like, and, it's hard, too, because even now, and going back to what you mentioned about Cheryl, you don't get an award for calling people out.
Yeah.
Like, no matter
people don't
what.
understand how difficult it is. That's why I'm always like, when people are like, why did they wait? Why didn't they say something? If that was me, I would have did this. Because it is a hard thing to actually have to sit down and be like, okay, if I say this, people aren't going to believe me. And then how do I come to terms
what were you
with
wearing?
what that could do to my,
what time was it?
My career?
What were you saying, Angela?
Right.
Were you sort of implying that maybe you were interested? Or actually, I heard that Jasmine dates a lot of men in the industry. So,
you
she's
did, right?
She's kind of fast. Right, but they will go through that. Like they will go through
Yeah.
your personal life.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I wouldn't even talk to guys in the industry. Like, no, I'm only talking to people who work in like finance or something because
Right.
I don't want any man to think, oh, you're in this room because I brought her here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're his girlfriend.
See how
you're
difficult
his
that is?
wife. And
You
men
think-
don't realize, like,
Because that can
we
affect
have-
your career. You can't even be in certain places or network the way that a man can.
I'll never forget, this is like when I was first starting out. And, funny enough, even at Bad Boy, and there was another female intern. And I do think she started dating one of the guys there. And it was somewhat age appropriate, I guess, because, we were all like over 18. Actually, I think she was over 21. And he told everyone.
Yeah.
And I think he embellished the story. It got so bad one day she just stopped coming to work.
Oh my
and I
gosh.
remember one of my bosses
But he's still coming.
He's still coming, and he was, by the way, like totally inept. I don't know how he got a paycheck. He must have known where the bodies were buried. But fast forward, I remember my male boss saying, "Don't be like one of those girls." So what does that mean? That we can't have a personal life?
Yeah.
Like you almost, again, you're either hypersexualized as a woman, or you have to be like the virgin good girl.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't just be a human.
I don't know what advice you give because women ask me all the time in this business, how do you navigate when guys are trying to date you? I told somebody the other day, and I don't know if this is great advice or not, but I
Get
was
an
like,
arranged marriage. I don't know. I guess that works.
and for the longest too, when I first started, I always said I
Did
had
you ever do that? Like lie about the fake
I
boyfriend
always said
or
I had a
husband?
boyfriend.
I used
yeah.
to do that too.
I used to always say, even if I didn't.
He lives in another country. You're never going to see him, and there's
Like, I have
no
a
pictures
boyfriend,
of him.
and they're like, I don't care.
I used to
You're
do
like-
the fake ring sometimes. You ever do the fake ring?
But
Yeah.
I told her, I said, look, all I can say is this. I get inevitably there are times that you'll have an attraction to somebody, really like them.
Sure.
Just start off as friends and
I
get
believe
to
that even
know
now.
somebody really well
Yeah.
before you make a move. And, just because you don't want to have those regrets. And I get
Yeah.
that things happen. You're single, he's single, or whatever, but just don't.
And we're around each other
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Like no matter what, you're most likely
And that's in
people
any
marry.
industry.
Yeah, who they work with. Like
Yeah.
that was what the show The Office was, predicated on. But I also tell when young women ask me as well, and I would even say this to young men. Just be very clear, like how this could affect your career.
Yeah.
Because if this is not the love of your life, you are going to marry them. Just if worst case, this leads to you being fired, are you okay? Like, is it worth it to kind of risk it all for this person? And I think when you're first starting out in any industry, but especially this industry, you have to have some stripes on your arm before. Like, now it's different.
Yeah, you can do
the
what you
way
want.
like we can move, we can date whoever, you know. Although now when like the young artists try to hit on me, I was like, no, where's your dad? Because I don't want to talk to you. But I'm sure your dad was at the tunnel in '98. So where's he at? But that's from a place of privilege, power, because no one can, you know, affect your bag, no one can affect your reputation. But when you're first starting out, I think even in 2024 as a woman, they will find ways to discredit you.
Yeah,
So
always.
you got to focus on the work and be so buttoned up there, because when I've interviewed artists, like they'll show me their phones. I'm like,
Yeah.
I know her. Oh no, I don't want to see her naked. Oh my God. Like,
And you know,
that's
I
what
do
it
a show
is.
called Lip Service, and obviously that show is all about sex, so people
Yeah.
feel more free. I don't mind people telling me stuff, you know, and I do feel like on that show, even though it's fun, it's intimate, it's not like too. I don't think it's too crazy where you feel like, and you should never feel like that, like being
No, and-
inappropriate with somebody.
And you should always, you know, at the end of the day, it's still work. Now, the lines do get blurred and we are having a good time. And I
Right.
get it. It's music, it's the entertainment industry. But if someone is like your boss, then they need to act like a boss, right?
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't be hitting on your subordinate. You know, if you're an unpaid intern, no one knows you. You have no career. So if that person now can control your career, like, does it mean it to you? And maybe that is the love of your life and you're ready to risk it all, and that's
Right.
great. Most of the time it's not. I
I always say, you know, these guys try to talk to me, they're trying to talk to 30 other people too.
100%.
And so don't think
Isn't
'cause-
the worst though when you meet like your childhood crushes and they're all such a letdown?
Yeah.
I've
it
interviewed a
sucks.
lot of the guys who they were on my like wall in the '90s because I used to rip out Word Up magazine
Yes.
from the library. So sorry to the library, but I used to rip it out of the library.
we'll have to talk about that after.
Yeah,
You know, I work with the New York Public
I think
Library.
the statute of limitations is up.
I think so too.
But meeting some of your heroes, and it's like, wow, I would never date you. And I like that in my mind,
Yeah.
you were like this pristine, perfect person. And in reality, you're terrible.
Now, listen, all right. I want to move on and talk about this next book
Please.
because you're doing a book about Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Ooh, and so is everybody on board to do this? Like, I know you've spoken to Damon in this book.
I mean, all the founders know about it. So
and they
that
know,
wasn't-
okay, so Biggs, Jay-Z.
Yeah, Cream knows,
Mm-hmm.
Jay's team knows, Dame's team knows. And for me, it's not like I believe in transparency. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like some sort of gotcha moment.
Right.
But for me, again, after Fashion Killa, which is the first hip hop fashion anthology, I realized like for my next book, I want to tell these important hip hop stories.
Okay.
And tell them in a way that's not being told. And no matter what, a book is forever. Like a
Right.
podcast interview or whatever, like that's, you know, ephemeral, but like a book is forever. And it also gives it a certain credibility. So in my mind, like Rockefeller is like the hip hop blue chip company.
Yeah.
I want this book to be taught in like college courses.
Right.
Like what can we learn from them?
I love
Music
that.
business classes. So that's the way I'm framing it.
Okay.
So yes, of course it's like the history, the stories, but I want it through that lens, not just like gossip or he said, because at that point there's nothing much there of kind of, you know, of heft. But right now I'm just knee deep in the research. So it's great interviewing people like Ski Beats who made Dead Presidents, right? Or even like the original Flava, Future Sound. They were signed to Dame before Jay-Z.
Right.
Clark Kent, like all of these amazing people, hip hop.
Remember they had
yeah.
the twin brothers?
Christian,
Christian, Diamonds in the Rough.
Yes, if anyone can find Christian or Emil, because I found numbers for them, but they're not responding. So if anyone out there can find them for me, would be great.
What about that female rapper that was signed?
Emil.
Emil.
Oh, EMIL.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the time?
AMIL. All money is legal.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Oh,
money.
wow. Okay.
She was part of Major Coins.
Major Coins, a group that didn't really exist, but yeah.
When are we thinking that next? I know we're promoting this, but when are we thinking a timeline?
Now
for...
you sound like my editor. Ideally, I want it to drop in 2026 because it's
Okay.
the 30th anniversary of Reasonable Doubt.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And as you
And also,
are,
book writing takes so long.
No, it feels like it takes forever.
as it should when you're a
80,000
real,
words,
Yeah.
guys.
and
Like,
you're
this is
also
not a
writing it
joke.
yourself because some
80,000.
people don't write their books themselves. And
Yeah, most celebrities have what we call a ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they pay an actual writer to, you know, do the writing. So when you actually are writing the book yourself and doing the interviews and doing the research, it's a marathon.
yeah.
Yeah.
And would you consider after that maybe doing a West Coast sort of maybe like an Ice Cube or like that.
She's like,
that
let me get through
NWA
this.
era.
I'm just trying to get through.
I'm coming up with suggestions
but
for the.
I do like that, but
Yeah.
I think for me, what's important in the literary space, and even in just the other projects I want to do in the future, whether it's documentaries, film, TV, podcasting, etc., I want to just tell hip hop stories in an elevated way.
Okay.
Can you see Fashion Killer being a documentary on? Because,
I am signed to CAA, and there are conversations happening, and that's all.
Because I could
tell
see
you.
that being a documentary. That's
I
gonna,
think
that would
it's
be
a
amazing.
documentary.
Visually.
Visuals have to be. I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be a
I
documentary.
loved
feel
reading
like.
about Coco Chanel and that whole story
Yeah.
because, I love fashion. You can't tell because every day I wear sweats. But I like to look at things. I like to go into stores and I'm always trying to see what people are wearing.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so I would love to visually see some of this come to life because I learned a lot.
Great.
Just from reading Fashion Killer. So
I learned a
appreciate
lot
that.
is a great endorsement. Maybe they should put that on the
I
paperback.
learned a lot.
I learned a lot.
The paperback drops on September 3rd. Pull that back to the promo. I feel like I'm a rapper promoting a mixtape.
You
Like, that
are.
is really what
You are.
selling a book is. And it's funny, at my book release last year, so the hardcover came out in October, but it's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and paperback, which is a little cheaper and also easier to put in your bag, comes out on September 3rd. But there was a time I was literally just selling copies out of my Louis Vuitton bag.
At
I
the
really
trunk.
felt like
That's
I
her
was
trunk.
Jay-Z out of the trunk. Guys, I'm cash money.
Her,
I have no
her
limit.
designer trunk.
Yeah, that's what it
we would've
was.
Definitely purchased that out the trunk, out the Louis Vuitton bag.
Yeah, but
I
I think
mean-
I think too, because so many, very few journalists who come from hip hop get to write books because the literary world is still, it's very academic, it's very male, it's very white. So I think that's another area that I just want to create those inroads to show people no, your voices are important and we need to have these stories, or it's going to be the same rapper memoir done to death,
Right. Listen, Big Daddy Kane, you talk about
interviewed
him in the
Kane.
book. Yes.
I interviewed Kane, and I had to ask him about the famous Madonna photo shoot where
he was-
him and Naomi Campbell, and he started laughing. And first of all, Kane is still smooth operator all these years later. I'm like, you know what? I don't need you to go on lip service. I can already tell what happened.
Yeah, we know what it
Fascinating.
is.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
But I remember because at that time he was on Cold Chillin', right? And Jizza was also on Cold Genius.
Genius.
And so they really wanted to fashion him.
really?
I had to think about those outfits. It was like the silky pajamas.
Suits, yeah.
He had that song "Come Do Me," and it was not his style at all. If
Yeah,
anybody
can you
has a
imagine?
chance to go
Come
listen,
do me.
Yeah.
So much for subtlety. But yes, women are loose. But yes, come do me.
Come do me.
Yeah, and also, why are
He
they
had a video and everything.
And as for the women, what do you mean come? So I have to
And
come to
think
your
about-
house and then do you? There's so many levels. You are
I think
so
it was like his
lazy.
girlfriend in the video, though.
Oh, that's
it wasn't,
cute.
yeah. And then
It was
remember,
consenting adults.
RZA was Prince Rakeem,
Yeah.
and he had so many ladies.
Yeah,
And then-
and that's the thing too, is even just how fashion helps certain artists become these sex symbols. Look at a Heavy D, look at a Biggie. These guys were now okay, we put Big in Versace, and now all of a sudden he has all these women.
They-
Right.
That was fly though.
It was very fly.
And
yeah.
and he made it really popular to just, you ain't got to be the handsomest man, the most fit man.
Yeah.
But women still were flocking to him.
Yeah.
And that was the whole perception. So he got that.
Yeah, and I think again for him, again according to Puff, because he wore Versace, Biggie now wanted to wear that, but Big had to always get custom because they weren't making clothes in his size, so it's always kind of stitched together,
And they're not necessarily doing it now either.
But also
No.
people like that because it's custom.
yeah.
And so
One of
having
one,
a
baby.
one of one, always
Which
an
goes
amazing
back
thing.
to Kane, because I remember Kane telling me he had multiple tailors. He's like, oh, you're like nobody.
Not just Dapper Dan.
Yeah, multiple tailors, because he's like, if I'm on stage, no one in the audience should be wearing what I'm wearing.
Can you imagine how horrifying?
Like, wait, how we go to the
Like,
same
wait a minute,
tailor?
you go to Zara too?
Yeah, that's funny because I did a panel not too long ago, and Jim Jones said the same thing. This is during the Dipset era. He's like, I went to a club in New York wearing a jersey as someone else had it. I took my shirt off. Whereas now, it's almost a compliment. Oh, we all dress alike. Going back to your question about who are the sort of young fashionistas, it's so hard because everyone's on Instagram. Everyone's wearing a Mary. Everyone knows the same stylist. So I do think people like
Or
a Tyler,
fast
the
fashion.
Creator. Yeah, or fast fashion, where we all are wearing the same.
Which wasn't around when we were younger.
Yeah.
Or not in the same sense.
No, and just the idea of trends being so fast.
Yep.
So I think it's someone like a Tyler, the Creator. Like, I love his style evolution. And now, you know, he's working with LV and things like that. But from Odd Future to where he is now, I just think he makes a lot of really interesting choices. But it is hard for artists. Like, how do you stand out in this marketplace where everybody could go to Instagram? Everyone can travel to the same boutique.
You can only wear it once.
Like, I remember Pusha T for the book, and he was like, yo, when we had to go to Japan to go see Nigo to get Bape, like, that was the plug.
Yeah.
Now everyone just goes online to, you know,
And there's a
wherever.
store right here.
There's a store right here.
I remember Nigo did he put out music and everything. That's how ingrained he was, you know, in the culture.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's hard now, but I do think that I would challenge artists, whether it's musically or sort of aesthetically, you have to do something different. Like, it has to be you, but I just sometimes feel I see artists and it's like, you're not wearing the clothes are wearing you.
Yeah.
You
Because
just
there's
got,
certain
you know,
things, like everybody has that Gucci sweatsuit. Everybody has that, you know, that makes it really hard. So.
And it's also a lot of pressure on artists. Imagine
It's
back
expensive.
in the day,
It is,
if you're
as hell.
Wu-Tang or, you know, Nas or, you know, Biggie, in the beginning, you could just dress regular because you were a regular person.
Right.
Now you signed a deal off one song. How are you head to toe in Gucci?
Yeah.
Who's paying for
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And I do think that also has a disconnect with fans because sometimes I look at music, you already have the Ferrari and you're on a private jet and you're head to toe Gucci. Who is this supposed to be inspiring?
Right.
That's me. I'm a bit of a purist, as you can tell when it comes to music. A little bit.
Well, listen, Fashion Killer is available now.
Yep.
We've been trying to make sure we got this to happen. I am so appreciative.
No, thank
and Sowmya,
you.
I feel like I haven't seen your face in person in so long, so I'm so happy to see Sowmya K, a.k.a. Sowmya Krishnamurthy.
Great.
Good? I did it right?
You did it good.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much, and you got to come back up and see us more frequently.
Anytime.
Fashion Killer is out right now. It's way up.